Okay, well, welcome everyone. This program is termed the Aspire program. It's a program that really serves as an incubator for programmatic research, and I think it's a great opportunity for folks on campus to think about taking projects and having those projects integrate with each other into multidisciplinary programs that can answer big questions. Lori Sussel and I lead this effort. It's a campus-wide effort to support programmatic research, and we think of it as incubators for programmatic research. Just want to tell you a little bit about the program and reserve a lot of time for questions. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so the purpose of the program is to increase the success of programmatic research on campus. It supports milestone-driven collaborations between investigators to solve unmet needs in basic and clinical medicine. And it's an unusual program because it's a mentored program. Lori and I, or Lori or I, meet with each one of the groups on a quarterly basis to help integrate the individual projects, to build the cores, to think about what steps you need to take to develop a program application, and to help you with that PPG application. The award supports $100,000 a year for 2 years. It funds 3 to 5 investigators with complementary scientific backgrounds focusing on a complex unmet need. Supports the development of interdisciplinary programmatic research, and a single R01, multi-PI R01s won't be supported as part of this. So it's really a program that we're interested in stimulating the development of. There are 2 categories of support. One is the School of Medicine support, which the PI and the project leads must have primary appointments in the School of Medicine, and we anticipate 2 to 3 awards this next year. And then we have a campus-wide program that's supported by the Chancellor's Office, where the PI and program leads represent at least 2 different CU Anschutz schools or colleges across campus. Letters of intent are due the end of October, and the applications are due the middle of December. The eligibility for this program is that it requires at least 3 and no more than 5 investigators, inclusive of the PI, and requires, and there are no MPIs as program leads here. So 1 single program lead. At least 2 investigators must have a primary appointment at the University of Colorado. Other investigators can be in other universities and affiliated programs with the University of Colorado. Up to 2 investigators may be included from an institution outside of CU. The proposal needs to include multiple projects and cores that address an unmet basic or clinical need. And I think that's sort of the bottom line, is that there have to be multiple projects and cores that form this programmatic approach to solving a problem. Letters of intent are required, and they'll be used to assess eligibility. We don't want you wasting your time putting this together. So if your letter of intent doesn't include a programmatic approach to this RFA, we'll let you know, and we'll let you know why we don't think it includes a programmatic approach. The deadlines for these letters of intent are the end of October. And the components are pretty simple. It's a 1-page letter of intent. just the names of the PI and the project leads, the email addresses of the individuals, the title of the application, and the category of whether it's a School of Medicine or a campus-wide, cross-campus approach, Category 1 or Category 2. And a brief description of the program and the anticipated topic. The RFA components are very straightforward and are better spelled out on the website than I can go over here, but basically it includes specific aims, the research plan. The investigators were very interested in the path to external funding. And then there are other aspects that are ancillary aspects of the proposal that need to be included. The budget and budget justification should be included, and importantly, there are no indirect costs, and investigator salary is not supported on this RFA. So the way we evaluate this program is, first of all, we do it through an ad hoc committee that does not have conflicts with the applications that come in. We look at the scientific merit and the scientific theme. We think very strategically about the programmatic integration of the scientific team. The prior productivity of the group of investigators, the likelihood of the project leading to extramural support in 2 to 3 years, how, what's the timing of the group and the group effort in relation to the next steps, and how the proposed structure of the expected external funding application will enable the scientific goal to be achieved. So far, this program has been in existence for 2 years, and we've funded 8 different groups in 8 different departments with a variety of different topics, as you can see, from asthma to mitochondrial dysfunction, and lots of things in between. The 4 groups that we funded originally in 2022, 3 of those 4 groups are either have or are going to submit program projects. So Lori and I are really pleased with the progress that those projects have made. And the last 4 projects that were just funded in 2023 are just beginning. I'm going to leave this slide up because if individuals have questions, they should get in touch with Paul Wood, who is the program manager. And if they have specific questions about Category 2, they should get in touch with Jamie Kuttner. You can also send questions to this Aspire email address if you have specific questions about the letter of intent or the application itself. And Lori and I will be happy to try to address those questions. So I know this was very brief and quick. It was meant to be that way so that we could answer questions that you might have. So I'll open it up to questions at this point.
You guys have questions?
Yeah, just a question. So my original thought with this was to try to apply for a P30 Central grant. That fee or something, it's not really programmatic research, it's more development of the infrastructure, right?
Yeah, so I'm pretty familiar with the P30 that you're interested in applying for.
Yeah, I know.
And the answer to that is it depends on the P award, it depends on the U award, but in terms of what you're thinking of, if it's the Environmental Health Science Research Center, then yes, it would qualify for this type of a program because it involves both science as well as cores, and it involves a big view of how that would be integrated.
Okay. My follow-up question I think would be, how can the money be spent? Because I mean, one thing that we were thinking about with that was to develop, like we're missing one of the core we want for the P30 Center. that money be used to
Sure.
put equipment, things like
Yeah,
that?
we're pretty, Lori and I have.
David, can you repeat
Go
the
ahead.
question because they can't hear us?
That's a good point. So the first question was, do P30 awards or non-PO1 awards qualify for this program? And the answer is yes, but it depends on the award and it depends on what type of program you're developing. If it's a program that involves the integration of science and cores, then absolutely, that's something that we want to support. That's something that we'd like to see more of here on campus. The second part of that question was, how can the $100,000 a year be used? And Lori and I have taken a very flexible approach to the allocation or the appropriation of these funds. We want to enable your program in the best way possible, and all you need to do is convince us that developing a core or developing a scientific area or developing a collaboration would facilitate the programmatic approach to research that we're all trying to facilitate, and we would be more than supportive of that. And it's not onerous to convince us. We're your partner in this process, even though we're sort of pushing you along through that 2-year period of time and helping to address questions that come up along the way. Lori, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you said it all. And also with this, we would be, if it's gonna only involve School of Pharmacy,
Yeah.
and School of Public, I was gonna say we'd be flexible,
I
yeah.
think it'd be public health medicine.
Oh, awesome,
Yeah.
yeah.
I hope we did it.
Oh, except for David, yeah.
Okay, good. Jared, any other questions?
No, that's all I have.
So kind of extending that a little bit. So in my case, I'm thinking about sort of traditional PO1. So I mean, 100,000, so obviously we have a core component, which of course now is non-existent, because but I mean, $100,000 is not really sufficient to build up the core. So is typically this money from experience wise spent on essentially developing the research that bridges and in my case would be 5 participants, all the research together?
So the question is, really, what has the money been used for? What have these funds been used for in the past in terms of supporting programmatic and other activities within these centers? And quite frankly, they've been used for a lot of things. And some have been used to develop cores, some have been used to develop bridging approaches between projects. Some have been used to develop clinical or basic resources that make a program work and bring a program together. I think one of the hardest things about creating a program project is not necessarily the joint scientific theme, though that's important, but having the components work almost like an engine where each component is dependent on each other, and all of the scientific projects are dependent on each one of the cores. And so what we will try to do is help you see how the funds can be used to create those bridges and that integrated approach and that interdisciplinary approach between the projects, and especially between the projects and the cores. The cores are becoming more and more essential to the review of a program project. Even though they're not scored, they're really important in terms of making a program work and seeing the full integration across that program. Lori has a couple of things she wants to say.
Yeah, I just want to add to
Lori,
that.
you may want to come here because I
I'm-
think there's a microphone.
I think the microphone's here. So, the goal of the 100,000 is not to basically, buy equipment and stuff for the core. I mean, you can if you need it, but I think like David said, it's really to develop that team research. So when you do put in that grant, you filled in the gaps that the reviewers would want to see, either from collaborative efforts like two of you working on an experiment together or getting something published together. The cores, it's very important that it not, like, you have a core that is not just you're not using an institutional core, that you have a core. It can include an institutional core, but it can't just be the institutional core. You want to have something that actually facilitates the research of each investigator.
Yeah, so that's kind of like somewhat of my other question, right? At least for the research we do, the imaging, new imaging approaches would be key to that. Obviously, neither PO1 funding will provide funds to buy the piece of equipment. So how much it can overlap, like, developing a new imaging approaches that may be using a pre-existing equipment that's already as a part of its imaging core.
Yeah, so Ritas is asking, can they, for say an imaging project, when you submit the PO1, can you say you're going to use existing equipment, but you're going to develop new technologies and methods? And that's totally allowable. And especially if you use that, you say, okay, I'm going to hire an expert technician who's going to be facilitating those different techniques using this existing piece of equipment. That totally is allowable.
It's sort of another question, and I guess it's for Aspire as well as for PO1 in general. His expectation is that core serves wider audience, not just a project member.
No, so the question is, is it expected to serve a wider audience or just the program project? And really, it's for the program project. That's exactly what it's for. And that'll be important also for your NIH submission.
Okay, and I guess I'll ask a question, and I don't know if we haven't answered that. One of the biggest issues that we have, of course, is mirror awards, right? Because most of the people that I'm thinking as part of this PO1 has mirror awards, and of course mirrors are a little bit different than classical L1 because it funds the lab per se. And despite my big efforts, I could not really find it clearly spelled out, especially for an IGMS, right? Because mirror, once you get a mirror from the IGMS, you cannot apply for any R grants. Does that include P grants?
Okay, Ritas is asking a question I don't have the answer to, and it's regarding the fact that many of his program people have MIRA grants, and so are people with MIRA grants allowed to participate in a program project grant that's funded by NIGMS? I will have to look into that.
Okay.
I don't know.
What is a mirror grant?
It's
R35.
R35.
Oh, the answer is yes.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a simple answer. The answer is yes. It's kind of a nice opportunity for people with R35s.
So the question then becomes, so R35s, of course, are designed to fund the lab, not the project.
Yeah.
So how do you then ensure there is no overlap between project that it's in your PO1 grant?
That I don't know. That would be a program officer question.
Okay.
But that would have to be addressed. You'd have to make sure there is no overlap for sure.
and Ritas was just asking about how do you ensure that the MIRA awards, which fund a lab, don't overlap with the project in the program project grant. One advice I would give, which is really important, especially for our review panel, is it is a really good idea to contact a program officer before you even apply for our internal program, because it will save you a lot of time if you can identify a program officer and you can ask some of these questions. And then also, because we've encountered a couple of groups that have come in, and it turns out there is really no program for them to apply to, which is, so doing that upfront research is probably a good idea.
One other point I wanted to make in terms of the cores that are part of the program project is, and I think this was answered, but I just want to make it very, very clear. They can overlap with existing cores in our institution, but they can't be existing cores within our institution. So you couldn't say that the genomics core is a core in your center. In fact, Tom Flegg, the Vice Chancellor for Research, will have to write a letter in your program project application saying that the cores in your PO1 are unique and separate from the existing institutional cores. The NIH does not want to fund existing institutional cores.
I mean, because the idea is in our case was that, we need to develop an imaging analysis
So that can be
project
totally
and
separate.
software,
Yeah.
which
That's
heavily
perfect.
relies on imaging equipment already existing, but would be completely separate in the sense that, you know, it would help with the image analysis.
Yeah, so that, we just had a great example from Redis, and that they need to have an image analysis core, which would piggyback on the existing microscopy core, but it is really for the program group, yeah. Mercedes, do you have questions?
Yeah, I have one question. I was a little bit late, so I apologize. We're dealing with mice, but what are the criteria for the Spire in terms of funding one versus the other? What are the main, maybe you already discussed this, what are the main criteria? Is the synergy between the project? Is it the PIs, the strong PIs? I mean, what are some of the criteria that for the Spire, not for the program, because that is an age, but from here, what are
So
you
the
looking
question is, how do we differentiate these Aspire applications? And I should say this is a relatively competitive program.
Yep.
Well, generally, we get about 30 letters of intent. And Lori and I go through those, and we really don't want you to spend time on something that is not an Aspire-like application. So we call out about half of those applications, and we get back to each one of the individuals and say, you know, this isn't quite on the mark because of these reasons. We try to give you feedback. 15 go about forward, and our committee then goes through a pretty rigorous process, and we fund between 2 and 4 a year. So, you know, out of 30, we're funding 4 projects, programs. And the question that Mercedes asked is, what are the criteria that we use? And I would say that the most important criteria is the likelihood of you being able to put in a PO1 at the end of 2 years. And how do we assess that? We assess that on the basis of, do you have a scientific theme among the investigators that's compelling and takes advantage of the scientific expertise within the group? 2, do you have a conceptual approach? This is more operational, but a conceptual approach of how these projects are going to link together and how they're going to relate to the cores. And 3, have you come up with like sort of the next step of how you're going to interface with the NIH, and is there a true NIH receptor for you to move your program along?
Basically, if there is any RFA or some notice of interest from NIH.
Or just if you've talked to a
To the
program
program
officer.
officer.
And DOD is also included in that. We've had one situation where there was really no opportunity at the NIH, but there was opportunities at DOD. And then we basically were able to connect them with the program officer at DOD.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also want to say that we recognize that part of the reason that there are not a lot of program projects here on campus, and when we compare ourselves to peer institutions, we don't have as many program projects as our peer institutions have, is because folks don't know how to put them together.
Yeah. No,
And they
it's
don't,
all-
it's not that we don't have we have great scientists here, we just don't have a culture that stimulates programmatic research. So we're gonna do everything we can to take as many groups in to help mentor them along that 2-year period of time, to help stimulate that programmatic research.
And we've also, in the past, even if we've had a really meritorious application that we didn't fund, we try and work with that group so that we can, you know, help further things, and so they can apply the next year. And that's actually worked. I think it's more, this is more of a facilitator program than anything else. We have an online question. Carol Sartorius asks, I have a concern that if cores developed are solely for the 3 to 5 PIs, it excludes and doesn't benefit the whole research community for a particular discipline. Can that be addressed? And we're not saying that other people can't use those cores, but the cores really have to be benefiting that group of 3 to 5 investigators and help facilitate the synergy between those groups, like advancing all the different projects. So it's not like they can only be used by those people, but when you write your grant, you're going to say, okay, this core, I think the good example is Ritas's example. They're going to hire someone who does computer or imaging analysis. And so, you know, maybe someone else can also use that, but it's going to really facilitate the research of that core group.
I think you have to look at it from the perspective of the NIH.
Yeah.
The NIH wants to fund a specific scientific program to answer a specific scientific question or address an unmet need. They're not interested in
course.
in supporting a core for the University of Colorado.
Yeah.
They're interested in helping you move your science forward with the group in an integrated way.
Yeah, and that I agree. I have experience with the program project, and yes, NIH doesn't like to fund existing course. Eventually, everyone in the university is gonna benefit because whatever is developed, it helps also the course, the existing course sustainability,
Exactly.
basically, because if you have, let's say, $50,000 to spend in the confocal microscope, that's gonna help the core to keep going, because otherwise the course needs also support. So, but I totally agree that NIH doesn't like to support a flow facility or confocal facility. So you have to come up either with some new technology that is not in campus, but it has to really fit into the project from the program.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So Mercedes brought up a really important point that I want to expand on, which is, you know, the university will benefit a lot by the cores that expand and become accessible to other individuals. But programs benefit the university in many other ways. One, it helps us become recognized for specific areas of research and develop that reputational focus for moving these areas of research forward. Two is it allows us to create these programs / centers / groups of individuals that serve as homes for junior investigators and trainees that really can benefit from that kind of career development and that kind of mentorship. And I think three, it creates interactive communities of scientists that I think help keep us all engaged in the scientific process and program that we all benefit from. I think part of why science is so difficult is sometimes it's isolating, and these program projects help us develop communities that far exceed the bounds of our own laboratories.
Is
there a training component to that,
no training.
So I guess other good question is, so can be stationed with too much collaboration between the people who are applying for the either Aspire or PO1 is too much? For instance, 5 people that I have in mind and who agreed to participate in this, we already have a fair amount of collaboration, including joint publication and so on and so on. Will we get hit over the head by NIH saying, well, you already have it, so you don't need additional money to do it?
So I think, so Rita is asking, can there be too much collaboration? And I think the more collaboration, the better.
Okay.
As long as it's not like, you know, it's a bigger question, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's fine. One thing I wanted to add that has come up in the past in different cycles, each of the PIs needs to be funded. And so this is this is really important. The PIs of each individual project have to have funding. It not necessarily be R01, but it has to be R01 equivalent funding. That's very important. And then there's a mechanism that David knows about for some of the institutes. You can get extra money if you bring in a junior PI, right, David?
So, I forgot the terminology for junior investigator, EIS?
ESI.
ESI. ESI investigators are oftentimes add-on, so you, in general, most institutions cap a PO1 at 1.55000 dollars per year of direct funding. If you add on an ESI, you can increase that amount of direct funding by $250,000 a year. And that's a real benefit, and it's really good and important. We have found in my own program project that we can also add on underrepresented minorities as investigators, and that helps expand the budget as well. So there are lots of opportunities to expand the budget. The other point that I want to make is most institutes at the NIH recognize that PO1s, although they're funded for 5 years, they think of it as a 10-year program. So it's much more than an R01. And from my way of thinking, everyone should be applying for these awards because they're ways of creating programmatic activity for a 10-year period of time. If you manage that program well, they really want you to continue. They really want you to try to solve that problem. They really want you to have a major impact in the field. And I can tell you from personal experience that when the institute directors testify in front of the appropriations committees, they focus on these program projects. They focus on the big questions that they're trying to ask and answer and the progress that's being made.
Yeah, but I also want to caution people because some institutes do not support program projects. So NIDDK does not support program projects. And so that's why, again, it's important that you do some upfront research to see if your institute that you're going to target does support program projects.
Yeah, several institutes changed years ago now that they did not support an only special topic that had to be in the interest of the institute. Something. If not, some of the institutes don't, you cannot do that.
Yeah, really important. But there are other sources of program projects too. It's like there are foundations, and we will support. Like if you said we're going after this big American Heart Association program, that's our target, not through NHLBI, but AHA. In cardiomyopathies, we would be very supportive of that and help mentor that program. Now, in terms of NIDDK, do they have like
You make
They have U, so
mechanisms
so like,
and-
I have a U from NIDDK, and it's,
that
but
is
it's
programmatic?
it's programmatic, but it's also in response to an RFA, so you can't just,
you make
yeah, and in fact, like, I was just at the NIH last week and they've approved a new RFA for me to renew my U, but of course it won't come out unless we don't have a government shutdown.
That's it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and so if any, I mean, I don't think we have any more questions in the chat, but if anybody has any other questions, they're welcome to contact either, we'll get the contact information, but also David and I are happy to answer questions.
And just one more question, so there's not a specific topic for the spire,
No specific topic for Aspire.
any, it's just, okay.
Yeah, in fact,
We
we
want good
want all
science.
top, we would love to see all departments and schools represented in the Aspire program. Our fully evolved Aspire program, we'd love to see all colleges and schools as well as departments represented.
Yeah, basic and clinic. No
And
bias, yeah.
I think the one closing remark that I should make is that, the leadership in the School of Medicine and beyond the School of Medicine are seeing success in the Aspire program. And as a result, the initial investment by Dean Riley has been expanded by the Chancellor to create this cross-campus category. And the Cancer Center also supports an award in the Aspire program on an annual basis. So we're seeing interest across the entire campus in a way that makes us think this program is addressing an unmet need on campus. And I think it's something that we really want to expand on and make sure that we're representing all groups across the entire campus. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.